Hello everyone, my name is Ehab Saif and this is the weekly knowledge sharing session. Our guest today is Mr. Tim Leech, who's an expert in the field of risk management, and today we will talk about the objective-centric risk and certainty management. Hello Mr. Tim, how are you?
I'm great, thanks for having me, Ehab.
Thank you very much. Mr. Tim, this concept is new, at least for me, and I think for many professionals in our field. And I just want to start by giving the background and introduction about this topic, and then we can discuss the details in our discussion.
Sure, happy to. So as we were discussing before we started the tape, this is an idea or a concept that I have been promoting since the mid-'80s. The idea that management, in addition to having theoretical responsibility to manage risk, that they should also learn how to formally assess and be able to report upwards on the status of whether, for simple terms, whether things are okay in their mind given the current risk situation and certainty of achieving objectives. So that was a concept that we proposed in mid-1980s in the Gulf Canada oil business. It received a huge amount of acceptance in the oil and gas business. My early clients were Arco Oil and Gas, Canadian Occidental, Shell, BHP, did work in the upstream, the downstream, did work in Saudi Arabia with Saudi Aramco. It was Yemen was Canadian Occidental. In the UK, we did a lot of work with Shell. On the upstream mobile, we did the North Sea, we did all over the world, Alaska, Gulf of Mexico. So a lot of acceptance of the idea in the 90s. I presented full-day, 2-day training courses in Dubai. So hundreds of people went through the training and the orientation on this idea in the mid-90s. And there was a lot of acceptance. KPMG licensed my tools and software to use all over the world. People like the idea. I use the term, it made logical sense. People got it, they thought it would be good and exciting, and at this time it was mainly heads of internal audit because few companies had risk management groups. So a lot of acceptance. We brought software to market. It was called CardMap. CARD stood for Collaborative Assurance and Risk Design. All of our tools were branded around that acronym, CARD, Collaborative Assurance and Risk Design. The software was called CardMap. So we brought it to market. We sold it all over the world. A lot of excitement. I was very proud of the software. We took it to the cloud in the year 2000. So that was 20 years ago. We started to offer it as software as a service, hosted in a very high security hosting center. People liked it. And then when Sarbanes-Oxley came along, everybody sort of shifted away. Then in 2008, the world crisis, the regulators figured out, yes, we have a problem. There's no good risk management systems in these big companies that the shareholders and investors depend on. So all of a sudden, companies started building out their risk management departments. Some decided they needed a chief risk officer. So over time, so as I mentioned, the original name of the methodology was control self-assessment. When I took it to the market, it was control and risk self-assessment. Later, I called it enterprise risk and assurance management. The most recent name that I use is objective-centric risk and certainty management. And there are very specific reasons why those terms, we've gone to it. We're trying to convince people to give up risk-centric risk management. We're trying to convince auditors to give up control, compliance-centric testing and internal auditing. And we're trying to get, you know, for using the words of the IIA, we're trying to get all of the lines to focus on the most important objectives to the long-term success of corporations. So hence the term objective-centric risk, and the word certainty, risk and certainty management. So what we're trying to do is transform. We don't like the words risk management. It implies, A, you have a risk management department. Everyday English interpretation says that's the department that manages risk. That's not what we want. We don't want the company and all of the managers to think that the risk department manages risk. We want them to think they own and manage risk. So you don't name a department risk management when you want every manager, including the CEO, to manage risk. So we're using the term certainty management. We want to, it should be all about managing uncertainty, which is a negative way of saying managing certainty.
If we want just to simplify things and try to compare the roles of the first line and the second line from the current traditional risk management into the objective-centric risk management, what will be the main differences in the role of the first line and second line?
Well, I think in many ways, and I will be presenting training in Oman for the ISACA chapter there, or there'll be a virtual webinar. And I'm also doing webinars in the United States, in Florida next week on October 7th, I think. I'm going to be talking about the IIA's original 3 lines of defense. So that was conceived in 2003, and it was conceived because companies started to build and launch risk departments. So internal auditors and these new people were confused about, well, what's risk department's job and what's internal audit's job? So the IIA published guidance, and it was called the 3 lines of defense. Now, the reality is, and the IIA didn't talk about it, it's actually a weak first line model. It presumes management is not trained and is not expected to assess and report on the state of risk related to important objectives. The role of the new second line, which was just emerging, which was risk management, and it also includes groups like safety and environment, and in banks, anti-money laundering, and foreign corrupt practices departments. There's a whole bunch of second line groups. And so as the IIA launched that, the regulators liked it because they'd struggled, and this was at least something. So they started to tell banks, you need to implement 3 lines of defense. So the reality was the IIA, that the IIA's model, which was a weak first line model, the regulators all over the world seized on it and said, this is what we want banks to implement. A framework where management is not trained to or expected to know how to assess risk. It was to be compensated by the work of the second line, the risk groups and specialty groups, and the third line, internal audit,